Good morning, everyone. Kate and Fiona Pearman joining you for this week's Facebook Live as we continue to talk about how we drive change in our organisations, societies, communities to achieve gender equality. And so last week we talked a little bit around being system aware. We talked about the origin of that, being self-aware, other-aware. And last week we introduced you to the concept of being system aware and the systems that we're part of. And so this week we wanted to talk about some of the key principles of systemic awareness so that you can start to use these to pay attention to, understand, and really drive change in the systems you're part of.
Yes, I think the important piece here is to start to see what hasn't been seen before. What we know about this work is a lot of this stuff will feel really resonant because we're aware of it unconsciously, and what we're doing is bringing these principles to conscious light. And we'll start off with the first principle around this work is acknowledging what is. That means that we accept the reality as it exists without resistance or denial. We actually accept what's going on. And one of the key pieces here is, men have had the power in this system for a very long time, really for thousands of years, hundreds of years, nearly all of since industrialization. It's really only in the last 50 to 70 years that we've started to disrupt that and see it differently. And so while women have some freedom today, that's really, from a historical point of view, a relatively short period of time. And to some degree, the truth of what's gone before is still driving some of the ways we think about things and the way we do things. It also influences how we feel about this whole notion of gender equity. If it was easy, we would already have made real traction with this. But what we know is when there is a lot of pieces of the system that are entrenched and a part of how we see the world, it gets hard, it's complex. It takes a lot of persistence to shift things that have been established for a long time.
Yeah, and what we know is that when we can acknowledge the truth of what is, and when we can include that in terms of how we navigate forward, what we do to drive change, it makes it a whole lot easier. When we ignore it and we have resistance, there's pushback. I think the second principle is around loyalty. We are very loyal as humans, which is a good trait to the choices we've made, the beliefs we have, and to the especially to the people, right? We've worked with for a long time. We see this play out a lot in terms of choices that women make in context of career. I hear a lot from women who potentially are working, have made different choices to the choices that maybe their mum has made. It's an example of where maybe someone's working full time, maybe their kids are in daycare 5 days a week, their mum and or potentially their father um, uh, they had a stay-at-home mum during their childhood, so their parents had made that choice to prioritize, in their eyes, to prioritize family. And I've seen women have really challenging dynamics with their parents and or mum around these choices. And in that example, we're very loyal. Their parents are very loyal to the choices they've made. And so that can make it really tricky and sticky in terms of how they're navigating decisions and also relationships.
Yeah, I think, this piece about loyalty, it really gets under our skin. It's something fundamental to us. And we see it all the time in organizations as well. People are loyal to the people they work with. They'll often stay in roles much longer than it would be, really useful because they want to look after their people or they want to, it feels too hard to leave these great people. And so in that case, it's almost as though the loyalty is misplaced. It's taking up too much room and they're not necessarily giving themselves the opportunity of what could come next because that's such a fundamental driver. I think the third piece we want to dig into is order. We'd like to recognize the natural hierarchy. In systems, in places, there is a sequence, there's a structure, and often we are very aware of that and we tend to overestimate it. For instance, age, people who are older with more experience, siblings, who came first, who was born first, second, and third. We recognize those structures. And in organizations, tenure and power is often held by someone who's been in the system for a long time. So currently, that tends to be older men. And so we've got a power structure that reflects the order of what's come before.
Yeah, I think particularly in that example, you have two elements of order, right? Age and then tenure. And so together, it makes sense that that demographic or that group have a lot of power in the system, and therefore, again, need to be included and recognized in terms of how we move forward. The next one is really all about belonging. And I think this is one that really speaks to our work, is something that played out for me a lot personally. And that's everyone wants to belong, right? To feel included. This talks very much to the basic human needs to belong and to feel safe. So it very much talks to safety as a core need. And so, we want to belong to our family, in organizations, in context of teams, if you've got social groups. It's a really critical piece in our work. We know that it is one of the greatest influences or roadblocks in terms of what stops women doing some of the things that they need to do to be more visible, like speaking up, asking questions, of putting their hat in the ring for promotion opportunities, maybe if they're not ready, or saying yes when they really want to say no. Women making these choices because they don't want to risk not belonging, or they don't want to be excluded. And so understanding this concept, understanding the role belonging plays for all humans in how they show up and operate in systems, can be really useful, again, when thinking about how do we actually drive change in a system.
I think the fifth piece we want to draw attention to is this notion of exchange, a good balance between giving and receiving to sustain healthy relationships. We talk about being in good exchange with each other. And so it's a really important piece to be aware of. Often we're taught very early and a lot about how to give, but we're not always taught about how to receive well. And if we think about the way that we raise girls, the messages they get from when they were very small, be selfless, think of others, don't ask for help, make sure, you take care of other people. This kind of emphasis of overgiving almost often leads to women being out of exchange, to burnout. And it tends to undermine women's capacity to achieve their desired career outcomes. So it's really important to consider what's going on in terms of exchange. We know that it is context dependent, it is expectation dependent. When I've been raised, potentially that, and have found it fairly easy to navigate my way through corporate structures and hierarchies and that sort of thing. It can be hard then for me to understand other people, and very often this can be men in organisations understanding the different journey women have had through organisations. And this is why this work can often expand our empathy for others, because we start to see not so much as things being right or wrong or good or bad, but, oh, I've had one experience, but somebody else has had a very different experience, even though we've been part of the same system.
Yeah, I think a really good example of exchange that many of us would be familiar with is where resentment breeds in, right? For an employee who is giving more than they feel that they're receiving in return. I always talk about the value exchange between an employee and an employer. And so when an employee is out of exchange, they feel like they're giving more than they're receiving. And here I talk about giving more time, emotional energy, creative contribution, intellectual contribution. I'm giving more than I'm receiving. And the receiving is not necessarily just about money, right? It can be about mentorship. It can be about career progression and opportunity. When we are out of exchange in that dynamic, then an employee can feel really resentful. Likewise, when an employer feels out of exchange, that they're not getting, they're not receiving enough for what they're giving, that's when we can start to dig into performance challenges. So these concepts, these key principles, when we start to talk about them through some of the examples we've shared, make a lot of sense in terms of how we make decisions as humans, how we show up in systems, and how systems operate functioning together.
Yeah. We're going to leave it there. If you've enjoyed today's confidence conversation, or you know someone in your network who'd benefit from it, please tag or let them know. If you'd like to see more of this work, you can head over to our YouTube channel, where there is thousands of videos for you to dig into. And when you're ready to go deeper with your relationship with confidence, you can visit our website